So today we are going to learn about case control study. So what is a case control study? Basically, it is a retrospective study or a backward study. That means we are studying from the effect to the cost. Okay, that is from the disease to the cost. Also, here both exposure and outcome already occurred before the study. Okay, and the study proceeds backward. That means the time is moving forward while the direction of inquiry is towards backward. Next, there are four main steps in a case control study. First, selection of case and controls, matching, measurement of exposure, and finally, analysis and interpretation. So we are moving to first step, that is selection of case and control. So in that, we have to select our cases. For that, we need a definition for the case, and it should include the diagnostic criteria and the stage of disease. Also, remember that if you fix a diagnostic criteria, you are not supposed to change it during your study. And also, eligibility criteria must also be specified. What are the criteria you put forward to select your cases? That must also be specified. Then sources. That means where do you get your cases? From where do you collect your information regarding cases? Either you can select them from hospitals or from general population. If you select it from hospital, it is very convenient and inexpensive. But the problem is that the patient might not represent the general population. Okay. And if you want to select it from general population, you can select it by using community service. And for selection of controls, you have to keep in mind that your controls should be free from disease. Okay, and also make sure that you have to select your controls similar as possible to cases except in presence of disease. Next, sources of controls. Either you can select it from hospitals, that means you can select your controls from the same hospital as you selected cases, but the control, that means the control group should be admitted for any other disease other than the study disease. Okay, and you can also select it from general population. Okay, so these are the things you have to write under your first steps in case control study, that is selection of cases and controls. Second step is matching. It means selecting controls similar to cases in characteristics like age, sex, occupation, socioeconomic status, etc. So this is to ensure that the occurrence of the disease are due to the exposure being studied only and not due to any other factors. Okay, then why matching is needed? It is because you know that in reality, cases and controls differ in many factors like age, sex, socioeconomic status, etc. It means that you can't select a control group which is similar in every characteristics as cases. Okay, so these factors like age, sex, all these factors can act as confounding factors. So what are these confounding factors? They are variables that are linked to both exposure and disease. Okay, for example, alcohol. If you're studying between the exposure alcohol consumption and esophageal cancer, so in that study, smoking is a confounding factor because smoking is associated with alcohol consumption and also it increases the risk of cancer. So the effect of alcohol get mixed up with smoking effect. But if a person who is both alcoholic and a smoker, you can't say that which factor contributes to his cancer. Okay, the effect will get mixed up. So to rule out this, smoking status should be matched. That means you have to select your control group and your case group, which include same proportion of non-smokers and smokers. This is how you have to match in both group. Okay. Then type of matching. There are two type of matching are there, group matching and pair matching. So that's all about your second step matching. Next, we are moving to the third step that is measurement of exposure. It means identify and measure the exposure in both cases and controls using the same method. And data can be collected through interviews, questionnaires, hospital records, etc. and determine who was exposed to a suspected factor. Then final step, analysis. So here you have to calculate your exposure rate among cases and controls and also estimation of disease risk associated with exposure, that is odds ratio. To calculate exposure rate among cases and controls, you have to construct a 2 by 2 table. I hope you everyone knows that. a constructed 2 by 2 table that is A, B, C, and D. And in the top of the table, you have to write the disease, and on the left side, you have to write the exposure. And by that way, you have to calculate exposure rate among cases, that is A by A plus C. Exposure rate among control group is B by B plus D. Okay. Then you have to calculate odds ratio. It is very easy to calculate odds ratio. You have to just calculate AD by BC. Just multiply it. And after calculating, if you get odds ratio is equal to 1, it means that there is no association between your disease and the exposure. And if odds ratio is greater than 1, it means that there is a positive association between your exposure and disease. That means the exposure being studied is a risk factor. If the odds ratio is less than 1, then it is a negative association. That means your exposure is not a risk factor. Okay, or maybe it is a protective factor. Okay, so that's all about your final step analysis and interpretation. Next, we are going to discuss about bias. What are the bias in case control study? First, one is due to confounding factors, bias can occur. I already discussed about that. That confounding factors are a third factor which is related to both exposure and disease. And I also mentioned about the example alcohol and esophageal cancer. And we can control the confounding factors by matching. Next one is memory or recall bias. That is, cases may remember exposure like smoking diet more accurately than control. It means that a diseased person is more worried about his condition than a non-diseased person. So he will remember everything regarding his disease. Okay. Then this memory bias, it can be controlled by using objective records instead of relying on memory. Next one is Next one is selection bias. So it occurs if case and controls are not comparable. Example, choosing hospitals control having disease related to same exposure. And it can be controlled by careful selection criteria using population-based controls. Then other bias are Bergsonian bias and interviewer bias. Bergsonian bias it is seen in hospital studies. Interviewer bias means the bias occurring due to the error in interviewing. Okay. Next, the advantages and disadvantages of case control study. What are the advantages? It is easy to carry out. It is rapid and inexpensive. It requires only very few of subjects. There is no risk to subjects like in cohort, and it also allows the study of different etiological factors. Risk factors can be identified. It do not require a follow-up like in cohort, and also there are no or minimal ethical problems. Okay, that's all about advantages. Next, disadvantages. There is a bias. Okay, problems of bias are there. Selection of appropriate control group is very difficult, and also it cannot measure incidence, and it do not distinguish between cause and associated factors, and also it is not used for evaluation of therapy or prophylaxis of disease. Okay, so these are the disadvantages. So that's all about case control study. Thank you.